Huddle Up Podcast. It is the Observations with Big Jim. I am your host, Big Jim, and it is, as I'm recording this, Sunday, November the 12th, 2023, and this is Observations Podcast number 30, and I do apologize. It's been a couple weeks since I got one of these podcasts down. I kind of got out of my regular routine on it. And then I was going to hit one last week after our live show, and I just, towards the end of the show, kind of started to get like a sore throat or something, and I just didn't want to push it, so I wanted to get some thoughts down here for this one. Before I jump into the observations, I just want to remind everyone about our show. You can subscribe to us, Huddle Up Podcast. Look for the Huddle Up Podcast Incorporated logo on all your podcast platforms, YouTube, twitch.tv/Huddle Up Podcast, as well as on Facebook and Twitter at Huddle Up Podcast. You can get our merchandise at tpublic.com. Any of our locations, be it social media, podcast app, all of that, you can hit the link for the link tree, and that will get you everything and everywhere you need to be Huddle Up-wise. If you have a podcast platform that you cannot find us on, reach out to us on any social media, and I'll be happy to look into that and make sure that gets taken care of. We want to make sure that we are everywhere that we need to be. And also, if you're on any podcast platform that you can rate and review the show, please do that. Please share the show with anyone and everyone that you think may enjoy it, and encourage them to do the same. That'll certainly help the show grow. My first observation this week, as a wrestling fan, this one is a classic heel versus babyface. Depends what side of the fence you sit on, which one's the heel, which one's the babyface. But a marquee legal battle looks like it's setting up between the University of Michigan football and the Big Ten Conference. The ongoing Connor Stalions, Michigan sign-stealing scandal, continues to be investigated. But Friday afternoon, the Big Ten Conference handed down a suspension for Jim Harbaugh, that he will not be allowed to coach on the sidelines or be in the stadium for Michigan's final three regular season games. So Saturday at Penn State, this upcoming Saturday against Maryland, and then Thanksgiving weekend at home against Ohio State. The decision was handed down while Michigan was in the midst of traveling to State College in the air, traveling for the game on Saturday, less than 24 hours away from when the game was set to take place. The timing probably could have been better, to say the least, for the Big Ten, but felt that handing that decision down with less than 24 hours to prepare for it, and not that I don't think Michigan was preparing for that to be a possibility. I certainly think that was the case. They had to be aware that, with all the rumors swirling, that a decision was pending, that there was a possibility that Harbaugh was going to be sanctioned in some form or fashion. So I don't believe that they were probably blindsided by it, but I still think it's I think it is a bit short-sighted of the Big Ten to make that decision with such a short period of time between when it is handed down and a game is playing, especially given that it's a federal holiday, observed federal holiday, where courts are going to be closed because Michigan but it was not granted, file a temporary restraining order to try and have the suspension not impact any of the final games of the regular season or the postseason. That was not able to be heard. There was a lot of reasons for it. I actually just saw a tweet within the last hour saying that part of the reason why is because the Big Ten also found a local lawyer near Ann Arbor to act as an appeal to the restraining order. And obviously with the courts being closed and it being a late day Friday drop, there wasn't a whole lot that was going to be able to happen. It was confirmed Saturday morning before game time that Harbaugh would not be with the team for that game. Nonetheless, Michigan got the win in that game on Saturday, and they move on with their season with 2 games left. But it is obviously it's a very complicated matter. I am not a legal expert, nor will I ever pretend to be. But I know within reading parts of the letter that was sent to Michigan from the Big Ten, they did point out that there was no evidence at all found yet that links Jim Harbaugh to any wrongdoing, but they still move forward with the suspension. There was a lot of analysts that weighed in on it and have pointed out that the decision to suspend at this point could possibly violate Big Ten bylaws, but they move forward with it anyway. Again, I'm presenting information as I see it from people who are legally smarter than I am. So, it is of course it's a very complicated situation. But to me, the thing that bothers me most about it is it is a legal matter, right? Like it is a legal matter. There was rules and bylaws and whatever violated allegedly by Michigan in their football program. And the what has to happen now is there has to be, because we know what Connor Stallions did, and he was suspended. He has subsequently been fired, and now the battle and the investigation is about finding, how deep did the scouting go? What coaches knew? What coaches didn't know? And was Jim Harbaugh part of this? Were offensive coaches part of this? Were defensive coaches part of this? All of that stuff needs to be found out. But in the same time, are we not in a place, in a world, in a country? Well, I should say in a country where you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. And I get it, supposed to be. We know how things like that tend to be, unfortunately. But with the decision that Big Ten made, it kind of says that, well, we didn't find out you were guilty, but we're going to tell you you're guilty anyway. You're not going to coach the last 3 games of the season. Now, because of the buying a recruit a cheeseburger scandal during the COVID pandemic, I know, it's tragic stuff, horrible stuff. How dare these people? Because of that quote unquote scandal, Michigan already had some practice without Harbaugh on their sideline to start the year, and so having to do this again, maybe it was a little bit easier for them than it would have been had they not had that at the beginning of the year. But in terms of the Big Ten and their decision to and Tony Petitti, the new commissioner of the Big Ten, kind of taking this line of the other schools and other athletic directors and coaches allegedly kind of forcing the hand of the conference. First off, there's a dangerous precedent that's being set by catering to a mob of schools. Because what happens if or when Ohio State gets accused of something? If Penn State gets accused of something, if Illinois gets accused of something, if incoming USC gets accused of something, well, do we just need to get a group of 7 or more schools to bang as hard on the door as we can of the Big Ten offices, and well, you did this against Michigan, so you have to act now. It is a dangerous precedent that's being set, and to me, and I saw a couple people bring it up, and apparently officials at Michigan had already discussed this internally, per sources, allegedly, right? That if Harbaugh and the program were punished before due process played out, that the University of Michigan is going to consider leaving the Big Ten. I'm not sitting here saying that they should, but what I'm sitting here saying is they should probably explore the idea, and they probably are. Because what you have right now, and the what was handed down on Friday, before again any evidence linking Jim Harbaugh to any wrongdoing in this matter, you have suspended him for their two biggest games. And I can already hear some people saying, well, Penn State's not a big game. Penn State isn't very good. I'm not debating you that Penn State's good, but you have a road game against just where the rankings have them, number 10 team in the country, in a hostile environment. Whether Penn State is good or not, that environment is always hostile and can trip teams up. And then, in 2 weeks, you have a battle against, again, only where they're ranked, currently number 1 Ohio State, your biggest rival, who hasn't beaten you since pre-COVID, who you've beaten the tar out of the last 2 seasons, and you're not going to have your head coach on that sideline because the Big Ten chose to act when they probably shouldn't have. And they did so at basically the threat by the rest of the conference. So instead of standing up for one of your biggest, longest, and longest members, who, and not that this should really matter, but is the number 2 revenue generator in your conference, instead of standing up for them and saying, no, let's let the due process play out here, you cater to the mob and you suspend their head coach for 3 games. So if I'm the University of Michigan, I'm at least exploring it. I don't know how and all of that, how you can get out of it, especially when season schedules are already set for next year. But I can guarantee you, people at Michigan are looking into it. Hey, Michigan fans, for years, I have heard how the Notre Dame business model of football independence and living in the ACC and all of the other programs for all your other sports is bullshit. But you know what? Michigan fans, we will, on behalf of Big Jim Sports, on behalf of the Huddle Up Podcast Incorporated, we will welcome the University of Michigan to football independence and to the ACC. Again, I have no idea if this can legally happen, but you have my support. Fuck the Big Ten. Staying in college football, everybody else in college football has a Georgia problem right now because Georgia is finally playing like Georgia again, coming off of a throttling of Ole Miss this weekend. They look to be heating up at the right time, and we've talked all year, and rightly so, that Georgia has not looked to be what we've come to know and expect from the Georgia Bulldogs. And it's not a slight of Georgia. It's not making fun of Georgia. It's just the reality of the fact that they have not looked to be what we expect them to be. But all of a sudden, they're starting to look to be, to quote the late Dennis Green, they are who we thought they were. Because they're starting to look like that team again. And if I'm the rest of the college football world, that's pretty scary to me. A 9-point win against number 12 Missouri last weekend, a 52-17 win against Ole Miss this week. Yeah, it's a little scary. Now they play Tennessee this upcoming weekend, then Georgia Tech. They're already locked into the SEC title game. It'll be Georgia and Alabama. I know, boring. Yeah. Again, but here we are, and it's just going to be this way again for a little bit, at least. As for this upcoming Tuesday, now we will break down the latest batch of college football playoff rankings. We'll break those down this Tuesday on the Huddle Up Podcast, starting at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time on the Huddle Up Podcast, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch channels. Bing! We will have those, we'll have those and react to them. But to me, Georgia should be number one. Everybody, you can talk about Ohio State's resume, yada, 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 bullshit. Especially with Notre Dame losing, Penn State now being a 2-loss team. Ohio State's resume is not holding up. They should not be the number one team. Georgia should be number one. Michigan should be number two. Washington should be number three. Ohio State should be 4 at the highest. Period. But it'll probably go Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, and Florida State because the committee has already told us what they think of Michigan, what they think of Florida State. It's just a matter of will they move Georgia over Ohio State. Well, we will see that this coming Tuesday. Staying in the college football for one more. Penn State, the team that was dramatically overrated and lost to Michigan this past weekend. They are at a crossroads. First off, they fired their offensive coordinator today, probably the right choice. The next offensive coordinator, I think, will be the 7th for James Franklin in 9 years. Couple have been fired, couple have moved on to other jobs, but I'm sensing a pattern here with James Franklin. But speaking of patterns with James Franklin, he is now 3-15 versus Ohio State and Michigan. He's 1-8 against Ohio State. He's 2-7 against the Wolverines. But here's the crossroads, right? Here's the crossroads. The other side of that stat, in 9 seasons, and this I believe is not including the COVID year, because everybody we're just pretending that season doesn't exist. But 82-32 in 9 seasons. It's a winning percentage of 72, taking out that 3-15 record against Michigan, Ohio State. He is 79-17. So that's an 82.2% winning percentage. By the time this season plays out, James Franklin will likely have his 5th 10-win season in 9 years at Penn State. They've had 0 losing seasons. He has a Big Ten title, 4 AP top 10 finishes, and 3 New Year's 6 bowl wins. So you hear that, right? You hear 72% wins. Okay? You hear in part of a stat 82% wins. Over half your seasons have been 10-win years. You've had no losing season. You've had a conference title, top 10 finishes, big bowl wins. And you say, what's the problem there? But again, that other side of that stat, when you look at this conference, the 2 best teams, okay, outside of Penn State, who is for the most part, in James Franklin's 9 years, have probably been the 3rd, maybe 4th, sometimes 5th best team in that conference. But 3-15 against the best in the conference. 3-15. Like, you want to talk percentages. Like, I brought up the percentage of winning percentage against the other teams. 82% against everybody that isn't Ohio State and Michigan. He is 17% against Michigan and Ohio State. That's the problem. So the question is, Penn State, what do you want to be? Do you want to be a 10-win team, or do you want to be a national title contender? Because if you want to be a national title contender, you should not stop at firing the offensive coordinator. You should fire James Franklin. Because, a zebra doesn't change its stripes, man. James Franklin is always going to be the guy who's not going to win the big game. So what do you want to be? That's the question. And I hope the answer to Penn State, by Penn State, is that they're happy with 10-win seasons. Because they're never going to win a Big Ten. They're never going to win a national title. And if my Fighting Irish meet them in a playoff matchup as the field expands to 12, if they play them in a playoffs, or a bowl game, I'm pretty confident that Notre Dame will beat them more times than not. Because that's also going to be a big game, and we know how big game James works. Not so well if you're Penn State. But what do you want to be? What do you want to be? All right, moving to the National Football League. The AFC playoff field is wilder than ever. And if you look at the field, and regardless of what happens with tonight's game, the Jets and the Raiders, which is currently Raiders leading 16-9 early into the fourth quarter. But when you look at the standings in the AFC, every team, with the exception of New England, is within 2 wins of the 7th playoff spot. And the 7th playoff spot, playoffs, is currently held by the Houston Texans. Who would have guessed that 10 weeks ago? Who would have guessed that 9 weeks ago? 7 weeks ago? But Houston, Cincy, Buffalo, notwithstanding for tomorrow, and the Colts all have 5 wins. The Jets, Chargers, Raiders all currently with 4. Broncos, the Denver Broncos, and the Tennessee Titans currently have 3. It's insane. Houston playing out of their freaking minds. These final 8 weeks to shake out, again, 3 wild card spots. And the Steelers and Browns both have 6 wins apiece. So when you look all the way down to the Titans at 3-6, Steelers are 6-3. That's only 3 games back with 8 to go. That is a long climb. I get it. But look around the NFL. Crazier things have already happened this year. Looking over the NFC, it's not going to be quite as wild of a finish. I'm going to sound very earnest E.J. Christian-like when I say this. You can probably already lock in the field for the NFC playoffs. Not the seeding, but the field. Okay? Eagles 8-1, Lions 7-2, Niners 6-3, Saints 5-5, Seahawks 6-3, Cowboys 6-3, Vikings in the 7th spot at 6-4. Now, the only one of those guys in the field, and that's why I said you can just about, because the Saints at 5-5 The Buccaneers are at 4-5, Falcons 4-6. They're still within shot of that division. But I don't see, and again, I understand that there's 8 weeks to go. But I don't see, and we went over on last week's Huddle Up podcast, Bing. We went over Washington's schedule and Atlanta's schedule and the Vikings' schedule. And I don't see Washington and Atlanta, especially based on what I saw today with both of those teams losing, doing enough to make up a 2.5 or more games difference between them and the Vikings, Cowboys, Seahawks. I just don't see it. So the only spot, the only team in the field that to me could change is the Saints winning the South, because they only lead that by a game. But yeah, it's the Bucks, Washington, Atlanta all lost today. All that's left to decide is can the Cowboys catch the Eagles for the division? Can the Vikings catch the Lions for the division? Can the Seahawks catch the Niners? And will the South winner change? So to me, 6 out of the 7 teams are pretty much locked in. Figure out the seeding over the next 8 weeks. The NFC South is going to figure itself out. Either way, it sucks. So the tale of the two conferences is really wild. Lastly, before I wrap up here, the Washington Capitals, I think I talked about them on my last observations, and we're off to a really, really slow start with new head coach Spencer Carberry and a lot of new faces, young faces, up from Washington. It was not a pretty start. The first 3, 4, 5 games were very tough. It was looking to be a very bleak, long, and ugly season. But over the last 8 games, this Capitals team is starting to turn in the right direction. And now I understand with a new head coach and with a lot of different faces and injuries and all that stuff, notwithstanding, stuff you can't predict or prepare for, it could very quickly turn back the other way. But this team is starting to play pretty well. Over their last 8 games, they are 6-1-1. They're now up to 3rd in the Metro Division. They were literally 8 games ago, they were in the basement. They were the last in the Metro Division, 2nd to last in the Eastern Conference, and they're on the move. What has been exciting for me to see is these young players, a lot of which I have seen come through AHL Hershey over the last few years, are starting to make an impact with this team. And that's been one of the Capitals' biggest problems in the 5+ seasons since they won their Stanley Cup. I always got to throw that in there. Since they won the Stanley Cup in 2018, is they have struggled to get younger. The NHL is a much younger, faster league, and the Caps have struggled to do it. They're starting to make that move now, especially with a young coach, first-year head coach, first-time head coach, Spencer Carberry. And these young guys are starting to make an impact. And some of these old guys are starting to get used to it. And what sucks is Nicholas Backstrom, who's been with the Caps for as long as Ovechkin has, almost 20 years, is taking an indefinite leave from the team to work. He had a hip resurfacing surgery 2 off seasons ago, and it's still causing him a lot of pain. And Nicholas Backstrom may have very well played his final game with the Capitals, and if he has, it stinks. One of the best Capitals of all time will absolutely have his number 19 retired someday. But it's a shame he's not. Looks like, and again, I don't know for sure, but it looks like he is not going to finish out his career, and he's probably not going to play another game. Not going to finish out his career with Ovechkin, which was always kind of the dream hope for me. They came in together. Would have been great if they got to go out together. But speaking of Alex Ovechkin, with a power play goal with a even strength goal and an empty net goal last night, he is now 69 goals away from Wayne Gretzky's record. And For a little bit. He hadn't scored in a couple of weeks, actually since late October, and it was starting to get a little concerning that it's like, is he ever going to score again, or is this just how the chase for the record ends? But hopefully now, as things are starting to gel and move in the right direction with this team, he'll find the score sheet a bit more. But I saw some people complaining last night about the fact that one of the goals was an empty net goal, and people have called like empty net goals like bullshit goals. First off, last night he has moved into a tie with Wayne Gretzky. You've probably heard of him. Pretty good hockey player. With the most empty net goals in NHL history. So if you're bashing Ovechkin for scoring empty net goals, you are in turn, at this point, bashing the greatest goals, the leading goal scorer in NHL history. So I don't think the logic really tracks there. You probably want to rethink that one, bud. But shut the fuck up about empty net goals. Honest to God, Alex Ovechkin has lost almost 2 full seasons to things that were outside of his control, okay? He had a season and a half pretty much lost to a lockout. And he had, about 3/4 of his season in terms of number of games lost to the COVID pandemic, because obviously the season shut down in early March of 2020, and they played a shortened, abridged season the following year. So I don't want to hear it about empty net goals. This guy, he would already have passed Gretzky's record if it wasn't for COVID and lockouts, things that he had no control over. He would have already broken the record. How do I know that? Because he lost games in the prime of his career. The season and a half to lockouts, the first was his first season, and then another was just a few years later. So that's how I know. He's currently still, with all of that, only 69 goals behind. But I certainly do continue to wish him the best of luck. Hopefully he can go through and end up getting that record. But that's going to wrap it up for the observations this week. Again, thank you for bearing with me as I don't get these. I will not get these every week. I hope to do them every other. As you can see, sometimes maybe every 3. But I appreciate you sticking with us. Certainly make sure you check out Huddle Up Podcast, the live show, the broadcast on Tuesday night at 8:30 Eastern Time on our Facebook page, our YouTube page, and on our Twitch channel. So just go to any of the places, Huddle Up Podcast on Facebook, on Twitter, on TikTok, on YouTube, on Twitch. And hit the link tree. It'll get you to all the channels. Subscribe, like, share, review. Get our merchandise over at tpublic.com. Support the show. We love it. We love doing it. We love listeners. We got this show. We got the Fantasy Hour, and plenty of content on the feed. So we love it. We love you guys. Thank you for supporting us. We'll talk to you Tuesday on the live show. Until then, have a great week.